8 months pregnant, and I found out the truth about my husband. On a Tuesday, 8 months pregnant, I opened my hospital pre-registration form and saw a name listed as my birth support person that I did not type. I didn't shout. I didn't confront my husband in the parking lot. I made one small change. I stayed silent, called a lawyer, and started saving receipts because I knew the truth would try to hide behind misunderstandings. My name is Natalie. I'm 30, and I live outside Charlotte. At 8 months pregnant, I thought I was stressed about normal things. Car seat installation, baby monitor reviews, which diapers were actually worth the price. I did not think I was going to be stressed about paperwork, identity, and who was allowed to speak for me. My husband Eric is 32. He works in commercial sales, and he's the kind of guy who can be charming on autopilot. He jokes with cashiers, remembers people's names, and knows how to sound calm even when he's not being honest. We'd been married 4 years. This was our first baby. I wanted a quiet pregnancy. I didn't want drama. I didn't want my body to become a battleground for anyone's ego. And for most of my pregnancy, it was fine. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I got a notification from the hospital system app. Pre-registration incomplete. Please review. I clicked it while I was in the parking lot outside my OB's office, waiting for my appointment time. I figured it was normal admin stuff. The form opened and I scrolled. Name, address, insurance, emergency contact. Then I saw the section titled Birth Support Person. And there was a name typed in that wasn't mine. Susanha. My mother Angela. My stomach went cold, but my face stayed calm. Not because I was okay. Because the moment you react emotionally, people like Susan can turn it into, she's hormonal. I scrolled down. Second contact authorized to receive updates. Also Susan. I clicked the change history icon, the little link that shows timestamps in the portal. It showed the form had been updated last night at 9:43 p.m. I was asleep at 9:43 p.m. If you were me, would you storm into the office and start yelling? I didn't. I did something smaller and smarter. I took screenshots. Form page, support person section, timestamps, my name visible at the top. Then I emailed the screenshots to myself. Then I went into my appointment like a normal person, sat on the exam table and smiled at the nurse like my life hadn't just tilted. The nurse, Jenna, came in with a tablet and said, "Okay, let's check a few things. Blood pressure, weight, routine questions." Then she said, "We just need to confirm your support person for delivery. It shows Susan Howard." I blinked, calm. "It does." Jenna nodded like she wasn't surprised. "Do you want to keep that?" I kept my voice steady. "No, that's not correct." Jenna looked up. "Okay, we'll fix it." Then she added, "We also have a note that Susan may call for updates if you are unavailable." I swallowed. "Remove that too." Jenna didn't argue. She just nodded and typed. Then she said quietly, "We can add a privacy flag if you'd like. It means we won't share any information with anyone without your direct permission." I stared at her. Because that was not a suggestion nurses make unless they've seen situations like mine. I said, "Yes, please." Jenna nodded. "Okay." Then she said, like it was a routine question, "Do you have any concerns about someone trying to access your medical information?" I took a breath. I didn't tell her the whole story. I just said, "Yes, I do." After the appointment, I sat in my car and stared at my steering wheel. 8 months pregnant, and my mother-in-law was already trying to insert herself into decisions that were supposed to be mine. I thought about Eric. Because Susan couldn't edit my hospital form unless she had access. Which meant Eric either gave her the login or he changed it himself. My phone buzzed. A text from Eric. "How'd the appointment go? Everything good?" "Everything good." I stared at it. Then I typed, deleted. Finally I replied, "Calm. Everything is fine. Baby is healthy." I didn't mention the form. Not yet. Because I wanted to see what he would do when he thought I didn't notice. That night, Eric came home with takeout and a smile. He kissed my forehead, asked about my day, and acted like nothing was wrong. After dinner, he sat beside me on the couch and said, casually, "Mom is excited. She wants to be there when the baby is born." I nodded slowly. "That's nice." Eric smiled. "She's family." I kept my face calm. "She's your family." He blinked, then laughed lightly. "She's your family too." Then he added, "And she's stable. She'd help you stay calm." Help me stay calm. That phrasing felt rehearsed. If you were me, you'd notice it too. I said softly, "Eric, I'll decide who helps me stay calm." Eric's smile tightened. "Okay, I'm just saying." Then his phone lit up. A message from Susan. I didn't see the full text, but I saw the preview. "Did you update the portal yet?" Portal. There it was. Eric quickly turned his phone face down. I didn't react. I didn't look at him like I caught him. I just said I'm going to bed early. In the bedroom, I opened my notes app and created a folder titled Receipts. I wrote, 6 months pregnant. Hospital portal shows Susan as support person. Updated at 9:43 p.m. Not me. Then I did the one small change that changed the whole story. I called an attorney the next morning. Not to start a war. To protect my baby. Miss Howard listened, then said, Natalie, do not confront without a plan. Document. Lock down medical privacy. And check if any other forms were changed. School, insurance, beneficiary, anything. Insurance. Beneficiary. My stomach dropped. Because I suddenly remembered something Eric had said 2 weeks earlier. Hey, I updated our benefit stuff. Boring paperwork. Boring paperwork. That phrase felt different now. I want to be careful with how I describe this, because I'm not giving anyone a blueprint to do anything wrong. I'm telling you what I saw, what I documented, and how I protected myself. When I logged into our benefits portal, I didn't even know what I was looking for at first. I just searched for beneficiaries and emergency contact. And I found a change log. Updated last week. By Eric's login. Emergency contact, Susan. Secondary. Not my mom, not my sister, not my best friend. Susan. Then there was a section titled Medical Decision Contact. Susan. I felt that cold certainty again, the one that's worse than panic. Because now it wasn't just a hospital form. It was a pattern. A pattern that positioned Susan as the person who speaks for me and Eric as the person who gets to decide that. I screenshot everything and emailed it to myself. Then I did something that felt surreal. I called HR. Not to accuse my husband. To ask what the rules were. I told HR calm, I noticed my emergency contact information was changed. I need to confirm who can change it. HR said, the employee can change their own contacts. If you're listed on his file, he can list whoever he chooses. I said, right. But what about my file? HR paused. Your file should only be changed by you. So I checked mine. And my file had been changed too. The portal showed my emergency contact was Susan, and my second contact was Eric's work number, not his personal. It was like someone had tried to move my support system into a controlled lane. If you were me, would you call Eric and scream? I didn't. I did the thing Miss Howard told me to do. I stayed calm and I kept building the record. That night, I asked Eric a simple question. Did you change my emergency contact info? Eric blinked. Why would I do that? I held eye contact. Because it changed. He laughed softly. You're paranoid. There it was. Paranoid is how they try to make you stop asking questions. I said, calm. It changed. Who changed it? Eric's face tightened. Maybe HR, maybe the system. I nodded slowly. Okay. Then I asked, did you give your mom access to my hospital portal? Eric's eyes flicked away. He didn't answer for a full second. Then he said, she was just helping. Helping. Always helping. I said, calm. Helping with what? Eric exhaled sharply. You're making this a big deal. Mom is excited. You're pregnant. You're emotional. I kept my voice even. Answer the question. He stared at me, then said, I gave her the login so she could help with paperwork. You hate paperwork. I felt my throat tighten. Because yes, I hate paperwork. But I hate being controlled more. If you were me, would you say, that's it, I'm leaving? I thought it. But I didn't move yet because I needed two things first. Safety and plan. I said, calm. You do not have my permission to give anyone access to my medical information. Eric shook his head like I was being unreasonable. It's my mom. I said, it's my body. Silence. Then Eric said, she's just worried you'll freeze up during labor. Freeze up. Another rehearsed line. I asked, who told you that? Eric's jaw tightened. Don't do this. I said, who? He snapped, Mom. There it was. Susan had been feeding Eric a narrative that I was unstable, and he was accepting it. Now I had to ask myself the real question. Was Eric being manipulated, or was he a willing participant? Because at 8 months pregnant, I didn't have the energy to solve someone else's psychology. I needed to solve my safety. The next day, I did 3 things. First, I updated every portal and password I controlled. Hospital app, email, insurance portal, bank app. Second, I set a privacy password with the hospital so nobody could get updates without it. Third, I visited the school office where Emma would eventually be enrolled because our district lets you pre-register family information. I asked the clerk politely, can you tell me how you verify emergency contact changes? She said, we require both parents or a notarized form. Notarized. That word hit me like a bell. Not because I was thinking about lawsuits. Because notarized forms are how people pretend something was mutually agreed. That night, I searched our shared email for the word notary. And I found an appointment confirmation from 2 weeks earlier. Subject, notary appointment confirmed. Location, a shipping store near Eric's office. Attendees, Eric, Susan. My stomach went cold. If you were me, what would you do next? Because that email meant this wasn't casual. It was planned. I didn't confront. I didn't tell Susan I found it. I called Miss Howard. I said there was a notary appointment with Eric and Susan. Miss Howard's tone changed slightly. Okay, we need to treat this as a legal preparation. We request copies of any documents they notarized, and we prepare temporary custody and medical decision safeguards. Custody. That word felt like a siren. Because I wasn't even a mom yet, and someone was already planning around my baby like it was a chess piece. Miss Howard told me to do one more thing immediately. Move your support network, she said. Have a safe place. Do not isolate. So I called my best friend Kayla. Kayla answered and said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I need a place to stay for a bit. I'll explain in person." Kayla didn't ask questions. She said, "Come now." I packed a bag quietly. Not a dramatic suitcase. Just essentials, maternity clothes, my folder of prenatal documents. Eric saw me at the door and said, "Where are you going?" I kept my voice calm. "To Kayla's, I need space." Eric laughed like I was being dramatic. "Over a form." I looked at him and said, "Steady, over a pattern." He stepped closer. "You're making me look bad." I said, "You did that yourself." I left. At Kayla's apartment, I sat on her couch and told her everything. She listened, then said, "I'm sorry, Nat. This is not normal." I nodded. "I know." Then Kayla said something I hadn't considered. What if Susan is trying to be listed for hospital decisions so she can control who sees the baby first? My stomach dropped. Because I suddenly remembered Eric's comment last month. Mom thinks she should be first to hold the baby because she's been through birth. First to hold. First to decide. First to be seen. That's what Susan wanted. And Eric was helping. My phone buzzed. A text from Susan. "Sweetie, don't stress. Eric told me you're emotional. I'm here for you." I stared at it. Because she said, "Eric told me like it was normal for my husband to report my emotional state to his mother." I screenshot it. Receipts. And then Susan sent the line that changed my fear into certainty. "Remember, I'm listed as your support person, so the hospital will call me if you act out." Act out. At 8 months pregnant, she was already calling me unstable. That wasn't love. That was a plan. When Miss Howard said the notary log included medical power of attorney, I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. Not because I didn't think it was possible. Because it meant my husband and his mother were preparing for me to be out of the decision-making seat in my own medical situation. Miss Howard stayed calm. "Natalie," she said, "a notary log does not automatically mean a valid document, but it means something was signed and notarized. We need the original or a copy." So we requested it formally. Eric, through his attorney, responded with a scanned PDF. It was labeled medical authorization. Not the exact phrase, power of attorney, but the content was the same direction. It stated that in the event I was unable to make decisions, Susan could assist. Assist. Always assist. It also contained a signature that looked like mine, but not quite. My name was there, in cursive, slanted slightly off. I stared at it until my eyes hurt. Miss Howard said, "Have you ever signed this?" "No," I said. She nodded. "Then we prepare a dispute." I asked, "How did they get my signature?" Miss Howard said, "Sometimes people use old signature scans, sometimes they misrepresent. Either way, we stay factual." We filed a formal letter to the hospital and the OB's office. Natalie revokes any unauthorized authorizations. No information to Susan. No access to records. Only Kayla and my sister as approved support people. Security note placed in file. I also pre-registered at the hospital with a password. Not a dramatic code word, just something only I and Kayla knew. The next move was custody protection. This is where I want to be careful. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm telling you what my attorney recommended for my specific situation. Miss Howard advised that once the baby was born, we could file for temporary parenting orders if needed, especially if there was evidence of attempted manipulation. Evidence. We had plenty. Hospital portal change law. Benefits portal change log. Susan's text calling me emotional and threatening hospital will call me. Notary log and document scan. Eric admitting he gave Susan my login. And then Eric made his worst mistake. He texted me at doi, paisprezice a me. "You're being dramatic, come home. Mom is worried you'll do something crazy during labor." Crazy. Not stressed, not emotional. Crazy. I stared at that word and felt my chest go tight. Because that's what this was building to. A narrative that I was unsafe. So Susan could justify being in control. I didn't respond. I screenshot it and saved it. Receipts. The next morning, I got a call from my mom. My mom doesn't like conflict, she likes peace. But her voice sounded sharp. "Natalie," she said, "Susan called me." My stomach dropped. What did she say? My mom said, "She said you're unstable and you're keeping Eric from the baby." I swallowed. "The baby is inside me." My mom exhaled. "I know. I told her to stop." Hearing my mom say she told Susan to stop felt like oxygen. Then my mom said, "Nat, what's really going on?" I told her, calmly, in bullet points. No drama, just facts. My mom went quiet for a long moment, then said, "You can come stay here too if you need. But Kayla is fine. I just want you safe." Safe. That word mattered more than any apology. Then I got a notification from the hospital portal. Attempted login from new device. Location ping, near Susan's neighborhood. I saved it. Now it was time to confront, but not emotionally. Miss Howard advised a structured meeting, in a neutral place, with a witness. So I agreed to meet Eric at a coffee shop, with Kayla in a nearby seat, not listening closely, just present. Eric arrived wearing his calm face, like he was the reasonable one. He sat down and said, "You're overreacting." I didn't argue. I asked, "Why did you add your mother to my hospital support person form?" Eric sighed. "Because you need help." I asked, "Did I ask for your mother?" Eric said, "You don't know what you need." I nodded slowly. "Okay, why did you change my benefits emergency contact?" Eric blinked. "That was an accident." I asked, "Why did you attend a notary appointment for a medical authorization in my name?" Eric's face tightened. He didn't answer. I asked, "Did you sign my name?" Eric laughed sharply. "Are you serious?" I held eye contact. Yes. Eric leaned forward and lowered his voice. "You're trying to trap me." "Trap him." "With questions." I said calm, "I'm trying to protect myself. My attorney has the records. The hospital has the privacy flag. Your mother is not allowed access." Eric's eyes widened. "You went to a lawyer." I nodded. "Yes." Eric's voice rose slightly. "You're making this hostile." I replied, "You made it hostile when you brought your mother into my medical decisions without consent." Then I slid my phone across the table. Susan's text. "I'm listed as your support person, so the hospital will call me if you act out." Eric stared at it. For a second, I thought he'd finally see it. Then he said, "She didn't mean it." I asked, "Then why did she type it?" Silence. "If you were me, you might feel heartbreak." I did. Because Eric wasn't confused. He was aligned with her. He said, "You need to come home. We need to look normal." Look normal. That's what this was about. Not love. Not safety. Appearance. I said, calm, no. Eric leaned back, face cold now. "Then I'll file for custody when the baby is born," he said. I looked at him and said, "Based on what?" He smiled thinly. "Based on your behavior." There it was. They wanted to create a record. So I said, calmly, "Good luck. I have receipts." Eric stood up and said, "You think you're smarter than my mom?" I replied, "No, I think I'm done being managed." He walked out. Kayla came over and asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Because now the threat was explicit. Custody. And I had to deliver a baby while someone was already planning to paint me as unsafe. Miss Howard moved fast. She filed a request for temporary orders to be set immediately after birth if Eric attempted to involve Susan or remove the baby without consent. She also advised notifying the hospital security office, not as drama, but as procedure. We did. Then, 2 weeks later, the baby shower happened. My mom had planned it months earlier. I didn't want to go, but my mom said, "Let's not let them steal your joy." So I went. And of course, Susan showed up. She walked in wearing a soft smile, carrying a gift like a peace offering. She hugged me too tightly and whispered, "Come home, don't be dramatic, this baby needs family." Then she looked at Kayla and said, loud enough for others, "She's very emotional right now. If you were me, would you snap right there?" I didn't. I smiled politely and said, "Please stop speaking about me like I'm not in the room." Susan laughed softly. "I'm just worried." Then she did the thing that made the room go cold. She said, "It's okay, I have paperwork, I'll help." I looked at her and said, "Calm, what paperwork?" Susan smiled. "Ask Eric." Eric walked in behind her, face tight. And he held a folder. A folder I recognized. It was the same shipping store folder from the notary appointment, the one with the logo printed on the front. When Eric said, "Easy way or hard way," a few women near the gift table looked up like they weren't sure they heard him right. My mom's face went pale. Kayla stepped closer to me without touching me, just present. Susan smiled like she was hosting. "Let's not upset the baby," she said softly. Upset the baby. As if my boundaries were a medical condition. I kept my voice calm. "Eric," I said, "what is that folder?" Eric swallowed and said, "Documents." My mom's voice shook. "What documents?" Susan answered instead of him. Just something to help everyone feel secure, she said. Secure. That word again. Security for whom? I said, if it's secure and normal, you can email it to my attorney. Eric's eyes widened. You brought an attorney to a baby shower. I said, you brought a notary. Silence. Someone near the snacks table coughed awkwardly. Then Susan tried to take control of the room with tone. She said, Natalie is overwhelmed and she's misunderstanding. Eric just wants to be a father. I nodded. Then he can be a father without his mother controlling my medical decisions. Susan's smile tightened. Eric opened the folder and pulled out a sheet. He held it like a teacher holding a syllabus. It's a parenting agreement, he said. I blinked. The baby isn't even born. Eric said, it's planning. Susan added, healthy adults plan. Kayla whispered, do not take it. I nodded. I said, calm, I'm not signing anything at my baby shower. Eric's voice rose. Then you're forcing court. My mom stepped between us slightly and said, Eric, stop. Susan looked at my mom like she was shocked my mom had a spine. Then Susan spoke, sweet voice, sharp meaning. Julia, don't interfere, she said. This is about the baby. My mom replied, shaking but firm, this is about my daughter too. Susan's face hardened for a second, then she recovered and smiled again. If you've never seen someone switch faces like that, it's unsettling. Eric tried a different tactic. He said, Natalie, if you come home, Mom will step back. Susan nodded quickly. I will, I promise. I asked, in writing? Susan blinked. Excuse me. In writing, I repeated. Susan laughed lightly. That's insulting. I said, no, it's clarity. Eric's jaw tightened. You don't trust us. I replied, you gave my medical portal login to your mom. Susan snapped, because you're irresponsible. That word. Irresponsible. My mom gasped. Kayla said quietly, wow. And that's when Susan said the sentence that exposed everything. She said, loud enough for several people to hear, she doesn't deserve to make decisions right now, she gets emotional. I looked at her. Say that again, I said, calm. Susan blinked, realizing she'd said too much. Eric stepped in fast. She's just worried. I nodded. No, she's positioning herself as my replacement. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do at a baby shower. I exposed the receipts, calmly, to the room. Not every screenshot, not a speech. One document. I pulled out a printed page from my purse because Miss Howard had told me to keep a copy. It was Susan's text. I'm listed as your support person, so the hospital will call me if you act out. I placed it on the table. People stared. Susan's mouth opened. Eric's face went pale. My mom whispered, Susan. Susan tried to laugh. That's taken out of context. Kayla asked, calm, what context makes that okay? Silence. Then Eric grabbed the paper and tried to fold it like folding it could erase it. My mom took it back and held it, trembling. I said, calm. That's why I'm not going home. Then Susan did exactly what she always did. She cried. Fast tears, dramatic. I just love this baby, she sobbed. I'm trying to protect him. Protect him from what? I wanted to ask. But I didn't. I stayed factual. I said, you're not protecting, you're controlling. Eric snapped. Stop calling my mom controlling. I replied, stop letting your mom run your marriage. A woman from my mom's side of the family, my aunt, said quietly, Eric, why are you doing this here? Eric looked around and realized he had lost the room. So, he chose the last move. He looked at me and said, fine, we'll do it in court. Then he turned and walked out. Susan followed, still crying, still performing. My mom collapsed into a chair. Kayla held my hand. I didn't cry in front of everyone. I waited until the bathroom where I put my hands on the sink and breathed. Not because I was weak. Because I was 8 months pregnant and my nervous system was overloaded. When I came out, my mom hugged me and whispered, I'm sorry. I nodded. I know. Then she said, we'll protect you. That mattered. Because for the first time, I wasn't alone in the family narrative. That night, Miss Howard filed an emergency motion related to medical decision interference and to request that any post-birth custody actions be structured immediately. Again, not for revenge. For stability. Then the hospital called me the next day. Not to scare me, just to confirm. A security coordinator said, Miss Miller, we have a note in your file. We want to confirm your approved support people. I confirmed them. Then she said, we also saw an attempted request for information yesterday. Attempted request. By Susan. I felt my stomach drop. Even after being exposed, she tried again. I said, she is not authorized. The coordinator replied, understood. That week, Eric started messaging me through text. Not apologizing. Negotiating. If you drop the lawyer, I'll behave. If you stop embarrassing mom, I'll come home. If you sign the parenting agreement, we can avoid court. I saved everything. Receipts. Then I did something else. I asked Miss Howard if I should send one final boundary message. She said yes. So I wrote, calm and short. Do not contact me except through the parenting app. Do not involve Susan. Do not contact the hospital. Any further attempts will be documented. Eric replied, You can't keep my child from my mom. My stomach tightened, because that sentence revealed the whole belief system. The baby wasn't a person to them. It was an asset, a thing they could claim. If you were me, what would you do now? I did the only thing that made sense. I focused on the birth. I went to appointments. I ate properly. I slept when I could. And I let the legal process build the guardrails. 3 weeks later, I went into a routine prenatal visit and my doctor looked concerned. She said, Your stress levels are high. We need you calm. Do you have support? I nodded. Yes, I do now. Because I had Kayla. I had my mom. I had a lawyer. And for the first time, I believed I could deliver safely without being ambushed by paperwork. Then my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It wasn't a threat. It was a photo. A photo of the notary folder on a desk, with a sticky note that said, Get her to sign. My heart stopped, because that meant someone on Eric's side had leaked it. Or someone was warning me. I didn't respond. I saved it. Then I forwarded it to Miss Howard. Miss Howard replied with one sentence. This is intent. The hearing at 36 weeks felt surreal. Not because court is dramatic. Because my life at that stage of pregnancy should have been nesting in baby clothes, not attorneys and documents. But court isn't about what should be. It's about what is. Miss Howard presented the evidence calmly. Hospital portal change low. Benefits portal logs. Susan's text about being called if I act out. The notary record and the suspicious medical authorization scan. Eric's messages trying to negotiate signatures. The unknown number photo of the sticky note. The judge didn't yell. She didn't lecture. She asked questions. Who changed the hospital form? Why Susan was listed? Why a notary appointment was needed during pregnancy? Why there was a custody draft before birth? Eric's attorney tried to frame it as overprotective family. Miss Howard responded with one line. Overprotective family doesn't require forged-looking signatures and repeated access attempts. That was the sentence that shifted the room. The judge issued an order. Susan is not to contact the hospital. Susan is not to be present at the hospital. No third parties on medical access. Communication between Natalie and Eric through the app only. Temporary parenting schedule to be discussed after birth, through counsel, with child's best interest as priority. It wasn't a dramatic victory. It was a guardrail. And that was exactly what I needed. Eric looked furious in court. Not hurt, not sad. Furious. Because he lost control of the narrative and the logistics. After court, Eric texted me. You're ruining my mom. I replied, calm. Your mom ruined herself. Then I stopped responding. 2 weeks later, I went into labor. Kayla drove me. My mom met us at the hospital entrance. We used the privacy password at check-in. And for the first time in months, I felt something that surprised me. Calm. Not happy, not excited, calm. Because calm is what you feel when you know the rules are enforced. During labor, a nurse asked, Do you want us to note anyone who should not be let in? I said, Yes, Susan Howard. The nurse nodded like it was routine and said, Understood. Hours later, I gave birth to a healthy baby. I'm not going to describe anything graphic. I'll just say this. The moment I held my baby, I felt two emotions at once. Love and relief. Because the baby arrived into a protected environment, not into a tug of war. Eric was notified through the proper channel, as legally appropriate. He arrived later, alone, no Susan. He stood in the doorway and looked at the baby, eyes wet. For a second, I thought I might see remorse. Then he looked at me and said, You didn't have to do this. I stared at him. I said calm, I did. He shook his head. My mom deserved to be here. I said, Your mom tried to control my medical decisions. She doesn't deserve access to my body. Eric looked away like he couldn't hold that sentence. He looked back and said, We'll fix this. I asked, How? He hesitated. Then he said, By moving on. Moving on. Without accountability. I didn't argue in the hospital. I said, Calm, we'll talk through counsel. That was the boundary. After discharge, I stayed with my mom for 2 weeks, because postpartum is a vulnerable time, and I wasn't going to risk Susan showing up at my house. Eric tried once. He texted, Mom wants to drop off gifts. I replied, Calm. No. He wrote, You're punishing her. I replied, I'm protecting the baby and myself. Then I stopped. Over the next few months, reality settled in. Eric and I separated. Not because I wanted revenge, because I couldn't be married to a man who treated my autonomy like an obstacle. We established a structured co-parenting plan with the court. No Susan involvement. No surprise visits. Clear schedule. Communication in writing. Eric complied, not happily, but consistently. Susan tried to contact me twice. Once through a new number, writing, "I forgive you." Once through a cousin, asking to just hold the baby. I didn't respond to either. Because forgiveness doesn't equal access, and love doesn't justify control. My mom asked me one night, quietly, "Do you think you'll ever forgive Eric?" I thought about it. I said, forgiveness is private, access is earned. And that became my life rule. Now, the title says, the truth I found out at 6 months pregnant changed everything. It did. Because I stopped pretending this was normal. I stopped accepting help that was actually control. I stopped letting a family system label me emotional so they could override me. And I learned something I didn't expect. Calm is powerful. Not because it looks nice, because it keeps your mind clear enough to document. I didn't win by screaming. I won by doing boring things consistently. Screenshots, logs, passwords, written boundaries. That's what protected me. And my baby will grow up with a mother who knows this. No one gets to define your stability to gain access to your life. Not even family. Not even a spouse. The last update is simple. Eric still claims his mother meant well. Susan still claims she was helping. But the documents don't care what they meant. They show what they did. And because I documented early, the truth stayed out. It didn't get rewritten. It didn't get softened. It stayed real. That's what changed everything. And that's the ending. Not loud, not dramatic, just documented and final. If you like calm documentary-style stories with receipts and a real payoff, subscribe. I post long-form stories like this regularly, and the next story starts with a small form update that turns into a full paper trail.